This video is about paddling conditioning. Positional paddling, so paddling out, paddling in between waves, paddling out after a wave, paddling just to hold position against a rip most of the time is quite different to sprint paddling for a wave, like this clip here. So two different types of fitness. We can train them both at the same time. We just need to know how to do that, which I'm going to explain to you in a second. Two different pursuits. You can still train for both things in the same training sessions. You just want to understand them each separately before you do so. Why is that? Because each of them have different needs from your body, and it's really useful to know when is the optimal time to train those needs, because they can often be trained together. You just need to know which one should go first, which one should go second, because every time we train or do something with our body, there's like a physical outcome of that. Our body needs to rebuild, and in that rebuilding process we actually use more of our reserves. Now, you can't use some reserves for two things at once. For example, you can't do a big aerobic endurance session with like heart rate at 150 for an hour and then go straight into a big maximum strength lifting session on, you know, the 6 to 8 rep range in the same 2 hours. Your body's going to be really confused about which one to adapt to there. So it's just knowing where to time our training sessions, what type of things we actually need for surfing. Is max strength something we need for surfing? Sometimes, depends on where you're at. I'm going to tell you how to figure out if that's you or not in this video, particularly for paddling and catching waves. And is, you know, aerobic endurance? Well, for some people, yeah. For some people, no. It definitely depends on what level you're at as a surfer. We all need it. Just to re-clarify, so aerobic endurance is an activity where you're kind of constantly working heart rate, sort of 120 to 150 beats per minute. Okay, so you're working pretty hard at something like a repetitive activity, paddling, like me trying to save this guy out of the rip here, and then, you know, heart rate driven up by the situation, and then knowing that it was going to be a bit of a slog. You want to have a good amount of aerobic endurance to just be able to just constantly paddle and move and deal with, you know, the bits and pieces that the ocean throws at you. This being an example, aerobic endurance for us both to get through and under this wave without being totally out of breath when we come up. This is all sort of fitting into aerobic endurance stuff here. I think he got into the beach here. Yeah, he was kind of almost at. Oh, I don't think I left him. No, I came back. Yeah, so we got him in shortly after this point. I think he sort of got taken in by this wave. Let's see him saved. Yay, saved. Oh. And anyway, aerobic endurance is what helped me get this guy to the beach. This car is going to show us how we should be looking at our paddling conditioning training. Okay, let's think about your paddling like driving a car, gears in a car, right? We're talking about paddling out, paddling around, paddling into position, right? Not so much getting a wave right now. So that's where our aerobic endurance system is really, really, really important. Now, we need an efficient use of our body's energy sources, and we need to have built up a good aerobic endurance base to be able to efficiently use our body's energy sources. That just means when I'm paddling for a long time, my body's just cruising through it, right? It's not going, I'm not revving, I'm not in first gear revving at like super high without moving anywhere. And I'm also not in fifth gear with like super low revs when the car's chugging along, not getting anywhere, right? I'm cruising in sort of second or third gear, taking it really easy, and I'm doing that at a really efficient level of fuel consumption for my body, and my body's able to do that, stay at level 2 and 3 while shifting up speeds without losing energy at level 2 and 3. For example, if I don't have aerobic endurance, just to sit at that, you know, basic paddling speed of getting myself into position, finding where the peak is, paddling back out, I'm not going to have anything left in my fuel sources, in my energy system, in my body to step up my speeds, my sprint speeds to catch a wave. And what's going to happen is I'm going to feel really heavy in the shoulders, and I'm not going to feel like I can speed up at the critical time when I see a wave coming. So aerobic endurance is really important to build first, so that then we can add more layers and more gears on top of that. Probably the best way for us to develop this kind of aerobic endurance, particular to surfing, is going to be ocean swimming, rower machine. You could use an Aerodyne, anything that you can just consistently have effort at for that sort of 45-minute period, probably 30 to 45-minute period, with a heart rate 120 beats per minute to 150 beats per minute. If you don't know how to get your heart rate, like if you don't have a heart rate monitor or you don't know how to test it, you can pretty simply just take your pulse over a 6-second period, times it by 10, and then you've got your heart rate per minute. So you just want to stay, that's a pretty broad range, 120 to 150 beats per minute, so easy enough to stay there. Now if you don't have access to a rowing machine, ocean swimming, board paddling, Aerodyne, any of those consistent type of aerobic activities which lend themselves really easy to developing this engine, which really is the best way to do it. Surfing all the time doesn't necessarily do it because you get changing conditions and stuff like that. And you've got the emotional aspect of A, dealing with crowds, and B, trying to get better at surfing and trying to catch waves, yada, 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 read the ocean. If you don't have access to those tools for aerobic endurance, you can do it through developing the system along with sort of a semi-strength endurance, semi-aerobic endurance, doing some exercises like this. I'm going to show you in a second. And also mixing that up with sort of short runs for 5 minutes in between. So getting your heart rate up and then having your heart rate up, working through some higher rep, lower strength exercises, and that can also serve to start to build your aerobic base and the muscles that you would need to be building with your aerobic base. So what about the part where we paddle in and actually catch a wave? How is that different? Well, that's more like gears 4 and 5, remembering back to our car analogy. And to create gears 4 and 5, first we need gears 2 and 3. And from there, we can build on that and start to increase some speed. So let's have a look at developing this speed. One study showed that the surfers with the biggest 1 repetition max of a chin-up, so a weighted chin-up, which I'm going to show you in a second, also exhibited the fastest short distance 5 to 15 meter sprint ability while paddling, meaning they can get to waves and catch them faster and start the wave with more speed. However, that doesn't mean they did chin-ups to get that speed. That speed's just indicative, the chin-up strength is indicative of the fact that they have the speed. So first of all, you would want to have your basic pull patterns like the ones I showed without weight and then moving into weight, being strong enough up to at least your body weight, right? 3 sets of 5 bodyweight chin-ups to start. And then it's likely that you'll need to do some speed-based conditioning on top of that strength training. Now, as speed is a secondary part of the strength building that you need for sprint paddling speed, i.e. not everyone is going to be able to do the chin-ups necessary or do the strength exercise necessary that would then be able to carry into speed training as a second phase of that to then carry over to the water. This is why surfing is quite hard for a lot of adults to learn, because it's very difficult to build, like I said at the start of the video, aerobic endurance and maximum strength or speed strength at the same time. They're quite tricky to develop at the same time, and they're very tricky to develop within the same sport. So within the same surf session, your body needs to be able to do both of these things, but it's going to be quite hard for your body to develop that just through surfing. This is one of the reasons it's really hard for people to build their paddle fitness, much harder than other sports, is because it has quite a broad range of needs. So what we're going to do is today look at the 2 basic components of that conditioning, where you should put them together and how they should go together. So essentially, your aerobic based conditioning, which we talked about in the first half of the video, or more than the first half, the biggest chunk of the video, aerobic endurance, that is going to need about 20 to 24 hours rest and recovery after you've finished it. Now, your strength training, on the other hand, requires a different set of biological reactions to be effective after you've finished strength training, meaning your body goes through a different process to what it goes through when you're doing aerobic endurance training. And those 2 biological processes would be competing if you do these sessions too close together. Now, you're assuming you're getting to surf 3 or 4 times a week as well. It's quite tricky to know where to fit these sessions. Good thing to know about your strength training is you can do it. If you were to surf in the morning and leave yourself the day to recover, you can do your strength training in that evening under a little bit of fatigue to get started, provided you're up in the sort of 6 to 8 plus rep range. I wouldn't do that for the 1 to 3 rep range. You want to be really well rested if you're doing lower reps. But for the higher rep range, when you're building your strength up, that's okay to do when you start just under a little bit of fatigue. Not a lot, you don't want to be really tired, but a little bit tired is okay. And then what you want to do is make sure that that night and the next day you recover really well. So you would take the next morning off and then you would surf that afternoon, or you would do your aerobic endurance training that afternoon. So we're looking at about 24 hours break between both of these skills. So how long should we be working at these things for, and how often a week should we be working at each of them? Well, realistically, including surfing, it can be pretty tricky. If you set yourself out 4 sessions, doing them at the right time can be pretty rough when you want to try and surf as well and have a life. So I would suggest setting yourself out 6 to 8 weeks worth of work, trying to get 3 to 4 sessions in a week. If one week you did 3 sessions and 2 of them were aerobic endurance, the next week the bulk of the work would be your strength work, so you would do 2 the next week. Now, it's really important to realize that you're not going to get the speed gains that you want right away. You will build your endurance gains quite quickly as you go through the program, provided that you rest enough. However, with the strength work, you're actually going to feel potentially a little bit slower to start with, but it's a necessary evil because there's just no other way for you to build the type of strength that you need to then become fast. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you found it useful and helped you figure out how you should and where you should be putting your efforts. Just to recap on that, if you currently surf and within 20 minutes you're super tired and you can't catch any waves, start with your aerobic endurance and then build some strength work in later. If right now you can paddle all day long but you just don't have the speed you need to catch waves, then you want to start looking at first your strength and then some speed training. Now, I didn't cover how to actually do the speed training in this video. I'll do that in another video, but I didn't want to add too many things into the mix. So the basic needs for us are going to be a certain amount of strength in the upper body, in our pull pattern, and a certain amount of aerobic endurance. Reach out with any questions in the comments. I'll link the study that I referenced underneath this video as well. I can link many other studies that I got the rest of the information from as you ask. There'd be too many that's over years of learning, but there are some really great books and great literature out there on understanding when and how we should train. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will look forward to chatting with you soon.